Good afternoon, Hack3rcon.
Hey, Hack3rcon!
My name's Gus Fristschie, and with me is Mike Wright, and we're here to talk about getting fucked on the river.
Yay!
I wasn't going to say that, but based on this morning's talks, I guess profanity is, if not encouraged, at least accepted. Now, I gave this talk at DEF CON. Did anybody see it at DEF CON? Excellent. So that way, it's exactly the same as DEF CON, so if you had, you might be a little bored. So presentation overview. I divided it up into 4 different sections, which any of you are familiar with poker. You can see it sort of corresponds to the Texas Hold'em game itself. So in pre-flop, we're going to discuss who we are, sort of give a framework to the online poker industry. This part's going to be a little less technical, but I think it's important in order to give a framework to the rest of what we're going to be talking about and why regulation is required. In the flop section, we're going to get into some past vulnerabilities. These are issues that we did not discover, but they have been published elsewhere. In the turn, we're going to get into some new issues that we had not seen documented before. They've probably been noted elsewhere, but I haven't seen them all pulled together in one place. And then, of course, in the river, we're going to get into some defenses on what the actual applications and you yourself as users, if you do play poker, could take. So, moving on to pre-flop. Who we are, this is a company I work for, based out of Washington, D.C. If you live or work in that area and are ever interested in a new job, talk to me. We're always looking to hire. It's a good place to work. They pay for me and my colleague to come out here, so thank you, Senate. This is me. You can read my bio. What really got me interested in this subject is I do like to gamble a lot, and I like to play poker a lot, and it was nice to be able to have one of my hobbies join with what I do as a profession. It really got me interested in, okay, what are these guys actually doing to protect the computer security of this game I like to play? I have with me Mike Wright. He did a lot of work into the web app stuff that you'll see later on. He's a hardcore security engineer. I had a little bit of help, people who aren't here. Steve Whitmer, who actually filled in for Mike at DEF CON since Mike couldn't make it out there. He did a lot of work also on the web app stuff. And then my good friend JD Durek did a lot of stuff in the forensic piece, looking at the actual poker client itself and doing some dynamic analysis into the executable. All right, so what is online poker? Before I get started, I'd like to see a show of hands of how many people have played online poker before in the past. Have anybody? Okay, so we got a handful of people. Not as many as at DEF CON, but I guess that's to be expected since we were in Vegas. But a lot of people, I think, have the misperception that online poker is like any other video game. You're just playing against a computer. You're not really playing against other people. And when it's quite the opposite, you really are playing against other people from other countries, all across the world. In this slide, we sort of see a timeline of the online poker industry. I want to put this in here because I think it's important as you see from where it started to where we are now. In the early 90s, poker was actually played via IRC, if you can believe that. So people were actually sitting there playing across IRC. In 1998, you start seeing one of the actual poker industry as we know it today being launched with Planet Poker. So that's sort of what you saw on this first screen. This isn't Planet Poker, this is Party Poker, but you start to see the similar interface. So it's actually a fit client where you're playing it with a game server connected to other people who are connected to the game server playing poker. And then you slowly see other sites start to launch. You see UB, Party Poker. And then in 2003, which is really where I got interested in the poker industry, and I think if you ever watch ESPN and you see the World Series of Poker and you see Chris Moneymaker, who was this accountant from Alabama, I think, who won the World Series and $3.5 million off of a $40 online poker entry. This really started the poker boom, and you really saw before this time a lot of casinos in Vegas, Atlantic City, they were closing their poker rooms, and because of him and because of the spike, you see a lot more poker rooms starting to reopen or expand. You know, I think there's even a poker room here, or casino in here now in Charleston, which has poker. So you see, poker has really started to grow again. A lot of that is due to online poker. And you see, 2005, we're talking about a $2 billion industry. And then you have in 2006, you have the Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act that got introduced. And this was actually tacked on to the end of the port security bill. So it was one of those things that we just threw on, and no senator is not going to veto the port security bill just because it had some other piece of legislation in it. A lot of people think this made poker illegal, or online poker illegal, but it really didn't. What it did was just make the act of transferring from a financial institution made banks liable that they couldn't transfer money onto these sites. So it made it more difficult to play online poker. And then 2010, you see we've reached $6 billion. So we're starting to, you know, the dollar value is starting to creep up. You know, before in 1998, I don't think anyone really cared about the security controls in online poker. You know, very few people were probably playing it. It wasn't that profitable, but as you see with any industry that starts making more and more money, you see more and more attention getting paid to it. Unfortunately, I think most of the attention that was paid to it was from the bad guys and not from the companies themselves to really increase their overall security posture of their systems and their gaming. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then in 2011, 4/15, they like to call it Black Friday in the poker industry, and that's when the Department of Justice came and seized the domain names of a couple of the major sites and confiscated bank accounts of these organizations across the world, you know, making it very difficult to play online poker in the United States. So that's just a quick time frame. I just wanted to put it up there, even though it's not really technical, just sort of show you where we're at now, where we were, and where we are going. And it's sort of like with, you know, when you think about it with, you know, Microsoft and Apple. You know, back in the 90s, you know, everyone's looking at Microsoft products, you know, and because Apple really didn't have a huge market share, and now, you know, it's somewhat reversed. You know, well, maybe not totally reversed, but there's more and more security professionals are looking at Apple weaknesses because they've maintained you know, a greater presence. Same thing with online poker. Before, it was very little interest. Now there's a lot more interest, and I think it's time for regulation, you know, in all aspects, but, you know, especially related to this talk in the computer security control arena. So, current events, what's going on now? We mentioned it on that last bullet. I mean, if you went to fulltiltpoker.com or pokerstars.com, you know, you'll see that this nice little logo from the DOJ who has come and seized those domain names. You know, they also seized a large majority of funds from these sites, leaving a lot of online poker players, you know, high and dry with, you know, literally millions of dollars locked on these sites. And I'm one of those players who has, you know, not a small sum, not a huge sum, but a decent amount, which I'd like to get back, that's stuck on these sites. PokerStars right away went out and paid their players, another site has, but also due to this sort of this enforcement by the DOJ, development and new features in some of the poker sites that we were looking at somewhat stopped, and it also made it more difficult for us to continue our research on some of those sites that we were looking at because we can no longer play on those sites. So some of our research was somewhat hampered just by the DOJ taking this action. We had, you know, started all this research, of course, prior to the DOJ. Online poker revenue just gets into why it's important. You can see here the number, how big it has grown since 2004 to 2010. 2004, we're only talking about $1 billion. 2010, we're talking about $7 billion. And really, this talk is focused on online poker, but we can think about it, online gaming in general. I mean, there's plenty of different sites out there that will let you play craps, let you play blackjack online, and when you throw in online gaming as a whole, we're talking about $25 billion industry, which is entirely unregulated within the United States, both financially and, of course, with lack of regulation standards, of security controls that need to be met for these sites and the infrastructure that supports these sites. In other words, there's a whole lot of money in online poker, as Jamie Gold and other people can attest to who've won the World Series of poker. I guess that's what $8.5 million looks like wrapped up in bricks. So where I'm going with this is regulation and compliance. And I think, I don't know what everybody out there does as part of their day job, but for me, a large part of it is regulation and compliance. Unfortunately, that's what pays the bills in today's age. If it's PCI compliance, FSMA compliance, HIPAA compliance, what have you. And I'm not going to stand here and argue that these regulations make all the difference, but they do make some difference. And especially to those industries and organizations and assessors that take it as more of a paperwork exercise and actually apply meat to the standards that are being enforced. Now you may think from what I've been saying that there's no regulation in online poker. It's quite the opposite, actually. I mean, there are several different bodies that are governing and licensing online poker. There's a Kanawaki Gaming Commission based out of Canada. There's the Alderney Gaming Commission out of the EU. Unfortunately, these guys obviously aren't doing a very good enough job based on the events of Black Friday, where you have these organizations that were regulating these online poker sites. And one of the primary things they are supposed to be doing regarding regulation is verifying that player funds were separate from the operational funds. And they couldn't even do that right. They didn't enforce that. So how can we expect them to enforce that account lockout is enabled, or that configuration management is taking place? We really can't. But you can read the sites. So you're at Party Poker, who's licensed out of by the government of Gibraltar. We don't look at Party Poker because they're not open to U.S. Players. But you can read their statement here. The system is reliable, resilient, and otherwise up to the highest standards of software integrity, including access control, change control recording, fingerprinting of executables, regular monitoring. Oh, it sounds impressive, but based on the research that we have done and the events that have occurred, I really don't think this is taking place. I think it's just fluff that's up there, and until the U.S. government enforces strong regulation, I don't think it's completely safe to play online poker. So we beat this down. There is a need for compliance. A standard needs to be developed. I would like to see, and I recently, based on my research I've done, actually this poker news site that I never heard of before, they contacted me and wanted me to write a series of articles for them. And I'm starting off writing this series of article about why there needs to be compliance in the online poker industry, and saying that we need to take the best from these different standards. If it's from STANS, CAG, or if it's from NIST and FSMA, if it's from PCI, and tailor it to online poker, which can be done. So these need to be regulated, not from a financial perspective, but also, and more, what concerns us more, from a technical perspective. And once again, why will this happen? Well, because there's a whole lot of money in online poker. You may not be able to see this very clearly in the back of a room, but this was the largest pot played online, and that's a $1.3 million pot being shipped to Mr. Patrick Antonius there. So, I mean, that's just in a single hand of poker. Granted, this is an extreme, most people aren't playing for these stakes, but there's a whole lot of money in online poker, and that's why regulation will take place. And, something I want help with, if people are interested in this subject, is to look at this type of stuff. I don't think a lot of people in the security community have been looking at online poker specifically. Maybe they've looked at online gaming, World of Warcraft, other areas. But I would like some assistance in looking at this. If you're a poker player, you're interested in it, get with me, let's talk about it and see what we can do to try to hold these companies accountable and perhaps give some guidance on how we can go about securing this industry better. All right, moving on to the flop. All right, Jennifer Tilley, she's 50 years old. Past vulnerabilities. Here we're going to look at just a couple of the past vulnerabilities that have been noted and published in the past couple of years. Some of these are fairly old, no longer apply. But again, perhaps they do apply. But I just want to give you a sense for what's out there before we get into some of the current stuff that we've been doing. So this random number generator. Of course, when you play real poker or any real card game, there's, they have a deal up there, they shuffle the cards, you're going to get a true and fair game. So how do you replicate that in online gaming is via the RNG. Now, back in 1999, Vulnerability was actually published originally in 1999. Planet Poker, if you remember, was one of the first online poker sites that came about in 1998. So they were very, very proud of their shuffling algorithm. So much that they actually went ahead and published it up on their website to show, okay, here's our shuffling algorithm, here's how secure it is. It probably wasn't the best idea at that time, as it wouldn't be now. But you can see in a real deck of cards, you have, in the first bullet, you have a huge number, which is a possible unique shuffles. Okay? So their algorithm, when these researchers started analyzing it, there was only 4 billion possible shuffles. To make it even less secure, the seed they were using wasn't the best, and that further reduced the number, and they were able to bring it down to only 200,000 possibilities, and then they were able to just simply brute force it in the time allowed, and they were able to show and be able to tell what card was going to be dealt next. Obviously, we did not look too much at the RNGs just because we don't have that capability, we don't have access to their algorithms, no one's giving that to us. It'd be difficult, unless you're an insider in the industry, to really look at it closely. My personal belief is, this particular vulnerability most likely has been fixed. And in fact, in today's world, you have statements that the RNGs, are being audited on a regular basis. This is from the PokerStars site, and they have Cigital, who is one of the world's largest consulting firms. So they went ahead and they did an audit independently and verify it. Any site that you go to will have this type of statement on it about their RNG. Is it true? I don't know, but it just gives you an example for the type of risk that is inherent when you're playing online gaming and online poker. And it's probably something that if you did have a standard that companies had to be held accountable to, there'd be some way to enforce this, that you have an independent body, looking at it, documenting it, you'd be reviewing it, you would know for sure rather than just seeing something from the PokerStars site. The UB absolute super user issue. This is another fairly large vulnerability that really wouldn't happen in a lot of other industries, because they have, or at least I hope it wouldn't happen, because they would have the necessary security controls in place. This caused, a sum of about $25 million to be stolen from an online players, community between 2004 and 2008. And the full story is really almost like a soap opera. It's pretty interesting to read. I think I have a URL up there if you are curious about it, but it goes into more details over exactly why it happened, what happened, so I'll let you go ahead and read it if you're interested. But basically, what happened with Ultimate Bet and Absolute Poker is the owner, and this is all alleged because there's no court of law, you can't bring these people to justice because online poker is not regulated, but the online poker is actually a former World Series of Poker champion, and he was running this site, and he thought that, or he goes to his developer with a story that, hey, people are cheating on the high stakes cash games on my site. In order for me to be able to tell if they're cheating, I need to be able to see their hole cards. Because of course, he's a World Series of Poker expert, or master. He needs to see their hole cards in order to tell if they're cheating. So the original developer was like, that's probably not a good idea to let people see hole cards in real time. So he actually goes and hires another software developer to come in and implement this. So they actually implemented this feature. They call it God mode, and allegedly the way it would work is they put some controls into it. They made it so the tool, you couldn't run it on the same computer you were playing at it. You could have to run it at a different computer, but you could simply relay what those hole cards were to the user who was playing. So at the end of the day, you had a player playing extremely high stakes who was able to see users' hole cards, and at the end of the day, there was like 23 accounts, 117 usernames, and $22 million that was stolen. And how did this activity get discovered? Was it from the regular audits that occur? Was it from their SDLC process and code reviews? No, it was from the user community. There's a large user community in the online poker, probably just like with other online gaming environments, and people started talking and realizing online that, hey, you know, there's one player is really winning a lot of money, and it doesn't make sense. And what's also interesting with online poker, or what's different than online poker versus live poker, is you get the ability to have your hands that you played, they send them to you in a hand history file. So this enables you to see like who won hands, with what cards, you know, what cards were dealt on the flop, the river, the turn, etc. So this one guy, you know, he started sharing all this information and hole cards. And here you can see a statistical analysis of a poker game with win-loss rates in a certain stake, and you can see the blue is sort of, you know, the average where everyone sort of fell between. And then you see off there in the upper right corner this one person who's winning at, you know, an obscene rate, you know, totally unrealistic over the sample size to be winning at that rate. So they were able to then go to the company and pressure the company to do their investigation. And finally, the company was like, oh yeah, something was going on here. You know, they dragged their feet. But in the end, they ended up paying back the player some percentage of the money, but not all of it. You know, so here you have a problem that really should never have been able to come to place in the first place. You know, if there were simple controls in place that other industries have already put into place and learned, you know, throughout the years. You know, configuration management, separation of duties, code reviews. We're not talking about anything earth-shattering here or very technical. It's just simple controls, auditing that need to be put in place. And the reason that this escaped or slipped through the cracks, you know, one, yes, they were unethical, but two, because there's no regulation or compliance in place. So that just another issue that happened. Third vulnerability that was previously discovered was this SSL exploit. And this was discovered by Poker Table Ratings. And no, Poker Table Ratings is not some auditing company that's going through auditing people's security. They're actually a company that data mine hand histories and then sell them out to players who don't play as many hands as perhaps other players, so you have a better, you know, statistical read on how players are playing. And all of a sudden they couldn't mine hands for this one particular site, so they started like looking at the technical details. And when they started digging deeper, they realized, oh wow, this really isn't SSL. They're just XORing the data. So they're telling all the players that, yeah, your data's, you know, the card's gameplay is being transmitted across SSL, and it's really not SSL. It's just XORing it. You know, we can just decrypt that on our calculators. So you know, they had a pretty cool proof of concept up there that showed a video and showed them actually, if you were on the same network or same wireless network, they showed you being able to see their hole cards. You know, of course, they notified these sites, and it was fixed 11 days later because it's hard to implement SSL correctly, I guess. You know, and you see here, UB/Absolute and also Cake Poker Network were vulnerable to this. So it's just another issue that, you know, even if you go to something as simple as FSMA and NIST, there's specific controls in there about data integrity and data confidentiality that if you were assessing and certifying these systems correctly, it would be caught. Miscellaneous account compromise. I just simply Googled poker account hacked, and you know, you have literally hundreds of posts from players talking about how their poker accounts have been hacked through various methods, through malware getting installed on their systems, through phishing attacks, through other methods. So obviously people, you know, are attacking these players, and you know, it's quite obvious why they're attacking them. That's where the money is. So you know, they're attacking the users, and a lot of what our presentation is going to be about when Mike gets into some of the web application stuff is how you can go about attacking the users, because that's a lot easier to attack than the actual poker application itself. Poker bots. This is not something that's necessarily a vulnerability, but it's something that the poker sites don't like, and quite personally, players don't like to play against bots. They rather play against a real person, so these poker sites try to shut down people. Now, poker bots aren't new, but as time has progressed, they've become much, much, much better. In fact, in some of our experimentation playing around with poker bots, the first time we used the bot and entered into a poker tournament, we won it. So they obviously can do a decent job. Now, you compare a poker bot to a chess bot, and there are similarities, but there's a lot of differences. Of course, a chess bot, it's virtually almost impossible to beat at the highest levels because it's all known information. Poker is a little bit different. There's always some pieces of information that's known, but you're dealing with a lot of unknown information as well. There's a really great article, the fourth bullet there, Coding the Wheel. If you're really interested in poker bots, I encourage you to read that. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information out there about poker bots. And I can see why, because the people who really have the information, they're making money with it, and they're not going to really be out there telling you how to go about writing your own bot and other tricks. But there is information out there if you dig enough. Just real quickly, this slide up there gets into a little bit more details about poker bots. The important thing to realize, the key way in which they work is through DLL injection. If you try to go about and modify the actual poker client executable itself and change things around, it ends up, it has a lot of checks and balances in place. They spend a lot more time protecting against poker bots than they do against other vulnerabilities in our experience, and that's just because they don't want to be cheated out of money. So poker sites have been cracking down on bots. How do they catch them? Betting patterns, tendency, programming flaws. Like if a poker bot is always clicking bet on the same pixel on the computer, that's going to be a sign that it's a bot. Scanning, and we'll talk about this in a little bit when we talk about how a poker client is somewhat equivalent to a rootkit. They're very invasive, these poker clients that you install to play the game on your computer. You'd be surprised what they're doing behind the scenes. They say they're doing it for your protection, but it's also a lot of invasion into your privacy. And of course, when a player is identified as a bot, these sites will go ahead and confiscate your money. Yeah, we won a tournament, but then they detected us and took away our money, as you can see from this letter they sent us. So they have been getting much better, but it's still a problem that the industry is going to need to handle as it moves closer to regulation in the United States. So, poker client equals rootkit. JD did a lot of research into this, and he couldn't be here today for this portion of the talk. But it has a lot of the same characteristics as some rootkits. And I'm not going to say, it 100% is actually a rootkit, but it does make modifications to your systems. It does do some invasion into your privacy as far as what websites you've been visiting, looking at your internet cache, et cetera, et cetera. So we did primarily dynamic analysis. We really haven't done any static analysis to the poker executables. It's in our plan to look more closely, doing some static analysis. We're just trying to think exactly how we want to go about doing that in a legal manner. But anyways, through some dynamic analysis, you can see some of the items that we've pulled up here. These function calls as far as enemy window names, enemy process names, and here you can see some of the names that correspond up to those function calls. I mean, they're looking for like ollie debug, okay? I mean, they're looking for these type of things if you're running and they're going, and then it shuts down. They're looking for some different software that they consider against their terms of service. So some of it, yeah, is for their own protection, but others, why would they not want you to run ollie debug? Because they don't want you to really know what that system, what that executable is doing to your system. Some well-known modifications that we observed. It makes some changes to your firewall policy in Windows. It goes through reading your Windows process tables in bite-sized chunks. It has the ability to read the title bar of every window that you have open. So even if it's not related to online poker, it's sitting there and seeing what else you're doing. Here you can see, as far as some additional functionality, monitoring, table talk, looking at your file system. And here it is in the bottom. We just pulled this out, what UB was doing as far as going into your Internet Explorer cache and supposedly, I don't know what's doing with that information. I'm not sure if it's sending it back, but it's obviously looking at it for a reason. And these clients, some of them are very complex with multiple parts. You can see the Cake Poker client has 3 main components. It scans itself at random intervals to make sure that no modifications have been made to it. If it detects it, it forces you to download a new version. And then when we started just poking around from some static analysis at the client, the Cake Poker client was huge, relatively. I mean, it's 12 megabytes. It was obfuscated, most likely encrypted. Compare that to the Bodog client, which is probably one of the weaker clients, in my opinion, at only 4 megs of size. So, some of these companies are taking security precautions, but it's more to protecting themselves and protecting the players. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mike, who's going to talk about some of the online poker network architecture and some of the web application vulnerabilities that we noted while doing this research.
Hack3rcon. As y'all know, this is the first time.
You still can
you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. The first time ever giving a conference, so I hope I don't suck at it. A little bit into the online poker architecture. What?
Speak up louder, you're saying.
Tell me when. Now? Good? Okay. So, with the online poker architecture, since there is a crackdown on playing poker in the United States with all the regulations and everything, a lot of the poker companies, they needed to expand their systems out to international. So, even though you might be authenticating to, you think you're logging into a server that's in Europe, like Bodog has a Europe server, you'll authenticate there. You're actually maybe be playing, somewhere else, Canada maybe that's where the game server is. So they really expanded, the servers everywhere. This is a little bit about how the clients work. You make the request to log in is number one. You'll get your DNS request, which will take you to the authentication server, and you'll authenticate over SSL 443 HTTPS. After you've logged in, if you go right into the gaming, you'll do another request, which will find you, the closest, or however they do to find you the game server. And then when you're playing the game server with the client, you're making different connections at different times. Whenever you're doing something with the client, whenever you're doing something with your account management, it's all going over 443 SSL. Whenever you're playing or going over the game servers, it is another encrypted port, and so far it's always been over 1024. This is just a simple Wireshark dump. It's nothing important or fancy. It was just showing what I just said in the previous slide. It was just showing at the top you've got your queries for the DNS, and then showing where you start with the authentication at 443, and lower down you see you're playing over a higher port. Beginning to look at this, we did some lookups of port ranges that we found. And you'll see a lot during the talk that we picked a lot on Bodog because they seem, from our perspective, to be the weakest one. You'll notice that in the Nmap scan, there were a lot of reverse DNSs, so you can actually, it was easier to map out their network because, like Cake, for instance, they just have, IP or IP-138, 139 dot whatever their ISP, the provider was. Bodog actually took the trouble to say, this is wireless.bodog.com or BetGenius. It shows their test servers and things like that. So it was a lot easier for us to map out. We did do the Nmap scans. They took forever, but we found some higher ports, but there was a lot of extra ports that were added that weren't really necessary. So, the web apps vulnerabilities. When Gus first asked me to help him with this, I was really excited about it, and I thought, it would give me, because there's so much money in poker, it would, it would test me or anything like that. By the time that I was done with it, I was asking, is this web goat with a different layout? because there were a lot of basic vulnerabilities, with sites that should be, 101 when people are designing applications. The thing about the web application vulnerabilities, like the site says, it was easily identified. Most sites, they try to put up logos on their site that says, verified by McAfee, or, it's compliant, or hacker safe. And even though we know that those aren't really anything but crap that people pay for to put on their sites, they didn't even go through the time to try and put that on their site to give their users somewhat a little bit of comfort. But what they do tell you is 1,000 different ways that you can give them money to put it towards any type of gambling or anything like that you want to do. I did want to do advanced techniques, but like I said, they were too basic, so we just took all the low-hanging fruits, and that's what we went with. With every site that I looked at so far, there was 0 input validation. You could put what you wanted in there. We found weak cookies. You could replay the cookies. You could, they weren't marked as HTTP only or secure cookies. Found a lot of expired SSL certificates. So, I mean, that's something that shouldn't even be difficult. You just pay your SSL certificate and keep it up to date. And of course, the biggest vulnerability that we found, our old friend, the cross-site scripting. So this was just a simple cross-site scripting. It was done on the include page. This was one that our colleague Steve did, just to show just a simple one. I went a little more into the application. I made up some fake accounts, and everywhere that it's bold was vulnerable to cross-site scripting. You could put anything in there. There weren't length. They didn't limit characters for things like the zip code or the phone number. As you can see in here, I put just a simple script alert in my address, and then just wanted to see what would happen if I loaded this in the client, the actual client. And when I did that, you'll see that even the client, was vulnerable to the injection that I put through the web application or through the website. You'll see in this cookie, there is a lot of information that they're tracking on you. I don't know if you all can see it, but it has my IP in it. It says my geographic location, where I'm going is obviously going to be there, but
That was persistent.
yes, this one was persistent. I'm sorry, the previous one was just reflective. We did find all types of cross-site scripting on the websites. This was just another reflective one, just showing the document.cookie. And you'll see a lot of these in the slide, and I'll try not to talk on them too much because they're all the same. We're just showing how widespread it is. So it's a cross-site scripting playground. You'll find everything from persistent, DOM-based. So if you'd like to just test your cross-site scripting skills, you can go to one of these sites and just pretty much do it in there. You don't have to worry about encoding. Some places you have to encode everything. You don't have to here. Another thing that we found was invalid redirects, and actually Steve found this one with the single sign-on, the SSL, where during the login or the logout, you could use that redirect to send a user anywhere you wanted them to go. So on top of those, we also found request forgeries, cross-domain. Steve did a little bit more information on the cross-domain stuff, but we didn't really come across too many Flash-based poker clients, so we didn't go too deep into that. We looked at a lot of the forums and affiliate sites because there's a lot of poker client, like poker ratings, a lot of forums for people to talk about what they're doing, and a lot of people just use the same username that they use to play poker, and we use that to start getting some lists of usernames that we could use in some later attacks that we'll go into. This is just another cross-site scripting. This one was weird for me because it was reflective, but it was also somewhat persistent, which I'd never seen before. In that affiliate ID where it says, you'll see it says DEF CON, I did the breakout, did the cross-site scripting, which was real simple. And this affiliate page actually has like 10 tabs, and normally when you're doing your cross-site scripting with your reflective, you do it that once, and then when you try and hit it again, or you go out and you come back in, it's not there, and it's not there anymore. But with this site, I could keep clicking different links, and when you put that affiliate ID, or when you put that injection in the affiliate ID, it tagged in your request every single time you made a request. So every time you went to the Bodog affiliate, no matter where you were going, you would get this cross-site scripting. But when you closed your browser, then obviously it would go away. This was just another cross-site scripting on poker listings through the search. It doesn't matter, any of these sites, whether it's the poker sites themselves or the forums, they're all vulnerable to cross-site scripting and many other types of injections. The one thing we did try to do more with SQL injection, unfortunately we didn't find any vulnerabilities there, whereas they don't necessarily filter out the SQL injection. It's just that we found that a lot of the clients aren't actually using requests that will go back to a SQL backend. We found that a lot of times there's a flat file that you can actually go to through a simple HTTP request, which actually lists all the games and everything like that in just a flat, looks like a CVS format, and that the client reads that constantly and gets updates from that. So one thing that Steve started doing, I didn't get a lot of chance to play with this, but he was having a good time with it, was Beef. And I'm sure all of you are understand what Beef is. If not, it's just a browser exploitation framework. It allows you to do a lot of things, such as if you hook in, you find a vulnerability like cross-site scripting, and you get the a user to click that link, and then it will hook into their browser, and you can send them Java code. You can force them to do requests. You can do a lot of things with that. You can add some exploits for Metasploit. So you'll see he didn't really do it to an actual person. He did it to his local machine. He has a bunch of zombies on the left, but they came from his same local machine. I asked him about it, and he said that everything just works. So every one that he tried, it always worked. This is just showing a simple hook from Beef. Just how easy. Just put that in. And one thing we're going to try, we haven't had a chance to do it yet, but is like you saw with the previous slide with the Bodog client with the account that persistent cross-site scripting. Putting something like this in, and then putting in like a support ticket to the help desk, and see if maybe we can get some more information or gain access. Use it as a pivot point into their network. So once you get that hook in and you've got that zombie, you can do a lot of things. You can send, like I said earlier, you send the raw Java script. You can use Metasploit plugins. Look and see where else they're going. Or clipboard theft. So if one thing that you can do is with Metasploit is take screen captures. So if you can get all the people you're playing against to click on a link, because everybody likes to click things, you just mask it so it looks like they're going to a table rating site or something like that. Then you'd be able to capture their screen while you're playing against them, see what their hole cards were, and obviously you'd be able to profit from that. So you know not to, or when to fold, or when to bet. So, web vulnerability summary is pretty much just, I don't play, online poker. Gus is the big poker player. So, just wanted to say, do you guys think it's wise to invest in this at this time? And then, sorry, I just want to give it back to Gus. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Mike. We'll wrap things up just with some different types of attacks. Mike focused on some web application attacks, but let's bring it even back to more basic, with just some basic authentication attacks. I mean, here you're dealing with sites that literally you saw that Patrick Antonius pot with 1 point whatever million dollars that he won in a single hand. So just think how much money he has in his account to play at those stakes. Probably well over $5 million in his account. So if you wanted to target those accounts, yeah, it'd be nice. We could hook them with beef and some cross-site scripting and see their hold cards that way. But it's probably easier just to guess their password. Especially when you start looking at the actual password complexity requirements that are required. I don't think we've seen anything this week, in the past 10, 15 years. Bodog allowing 5 characters. I wonder what someone's going to choose as their password. Maybe Bodog, maybe poker. So it really we looked at, here it is, just 5 different sites. These were 5 of the major ones at the time that US players could play on. And you can see that really only the Cake Network had what we would consider a complex password requirement of what we see, in government and private organizations today and what's recommended. Of course, passwords, we all know that passwords are weak and that whole process is broken, and there needs to be a better mechanism. Some of these sites, they do offer multi-factor authentication. You have to pay extra for that, but they actually give you, your nice little RSA, token. RSA hasn't been hacked, so everyone's fine there if they use that. Yeah, you see, it's very, very, very weak, and hate to keep on coming back to simple compliance, but PCI, HIPAA, SOX. NIST, these all have controls for these. We all make fun of certification accreditation, but it does have its place, and if these people were held accountable to the bare minimum, they'd be better off than they were. So with passwords that strong, it must be impossible to brute force them, especially with no account lockout. Read that again, no account lockout. So I tried this on several different sites to lock out my accounts, and 20 times, 30 times, the account would not lock out. And of course, it's good if the passwords are weak and a no account lockout, but you still need to have usernames. Well, those are really difficult to get considering you're playing against the people. So most of the people you're playing against, that's really going to be your username. And then even if it wasn't, there's these poker table rating sites that make it easier, that track players, track their win rates. So maybe you want to filter on someone who's the biggest winner at a certain stakes and then target their accounts. Can anyone say Hydra? Let's go old school, Brutus. So here we just went old school with Brutus, and this is just on Bodog's network. Bodog was a little bit different. In fact, you could log in different ways. You could log in with your user ID, or you could log in with this numerical value account that they created for you when you created an account. What's also interesting about this numerical value is it increments by 1 every single time. It's just interesting. So anyways, you can see what we did there. This is just a test account, but we showed how trivial it is really to brute force passwords. And this is something that if it's a $7 billion industry, people. This isn't small change that we need to protect. Along with the actual poker sites themselves, there's been a lot of supporting infrastructure that grew up to support these sites. Mike talked about the poker forums and how easy it would be to target poker players. But most times, you're logged into your poker account, at the same time you're going to be surfing some poker forum. So if you're able to use a cross-site scripting vulnerability like he showed you in one of those forums, you now have their gaming cookie. But there's other things that have come up as well. These training sites. Training sites have come up to teach you how to be a better online poker player. I'm a member of one because I don't like to lose money, so I joined it. But think about it. Here are players who take the game seriously. They're probably going to have more money in their accounts. We can attack these training sites, the tracking sites, media forums. All these different types of sites can be leveraged to attack the actual player who is playing online poker. Once again, we're not attacking the actual poker application itself, but we're attacking the supporting infrastructure. So here, poker table ratings, not to beat a horse to death, but here's another persistent cross-site scripting in the comment field. You can make comments on players like, you suck, but what if I just put in a persistent obviously something more malicious than this, but an actual real malicious payload, and we hook them when they go and read our comment. Attacking supporting infrastructure. Here's an email I got from Card Runners, which is one of these services that provides online training, telling me that that they had experienced an attack and that their email address and password and IP address possibly could have been obtained, could have been captured. So this shows you that there are really bad guys out there doing this. I sent these guys an email and said, hey, I could maybe help you, but they said they got it under control, so I think we're good. Attacking supporting infrastructure continued. This is the forums. 2+2 is one of the largest online poker forums in the world. And here, they have a little warning page up to warn people that someone set up a phishing page to look just like their archive site. So people are actually going and using these supporting infrastructure to attack the players. All right, we talked about the history of online poker, some of the past vulnerabilities, some of the new stuff that we just documented. Let's get into the river and finish things up on how you can protect them, how we can protect ourselves, and what needs to happen. So online poker defenses at the application level. Obviously they need to move away from password-based authentication to something stronger. Maybe implement simple things like account lockout. That could be helpful. Perform robust security testing. Have code reviews. Have firms come in and do vulnerability testing, penetration testing on their networks and on their applications. Maybe only allow connections from specific geographic locations. A lot of those accounts in that previous slide way back I showed you about all those accounts that have been hacked where I just Googled. It's like people logging in from China when they live in the United States. You probably don't need someone to log into China with your account. So they need to do some geocoding to protect that. And of course adhere to certain standards. These are things that the poker industry themselves could do. What about the players? Well, unless you have your own personal girl ninja, what I like to do is I have a dedicated VM where I play poker, just like the previous presenter had a dedicated VM when he looked at porn. I have a dedicated one where I play poker, so that way all I do is play poker on it. Obviously, basic things: antivirus, spyware protection. Don't play on wireless networks if you're extremely paranoid, because we all know that wireless really can't be secured that great. If you have to, use strong complex passwords. And then of course, simple, but users are dumb, as we said all along. They use the same password across multiple sites. The same password they use for that poker forum site is probably the same password they use for their poker gaming site. So next steps in research. We're continuing to dig deeper, and we really want help. I mean, anyone who's interested in this, let me know. I really haven't seen anyone else doing research in this area. We're going to dig deeper in, do static analysis of some of these poker clients. I want to do a custom client, sort of like a bot to bypass some restrictions. Instead of using Brutus, I want to make a automated brute force poker-specific password cracker. We want to map out some of these poker networks more, so I think it's interesting what's out there. And then, of course, we just picked on the easy stuff just because it was easy with cross-site scripting, but I think there's more that can be done on the web application side. I mean, what we didn't really touch on is these majority of the gameplay is, not via web-based, but a lot of times when you check your cashier, your balance, my promotions page, the actual client, opens up a web browser page, and that's all done via HTTPS or HTTP, so that's where the web application stuff comes into play. So conclusion, why we did not, uncover a smoking gun here. Hopefully, it seemed like a very small percentage of people that actually played online poker. So hopefully we educated you a little bit about what's going on in the online poker industry, what some of the possible attacks are, and maybe, got you interested in the subject to see if you wanted to contribute to some of the research to help improve this industry. Second bullet, again, regulation compliance. I would love to see it developed. I want to help participate in it. I want to make it happen. And, do I feel safe playing? I really haven't played that much since Black Friday, since my poker accounts were taken from me. I recently, I had player points on Bodog, which I converted to $8 in cash, which I ran up to $200 now, so yeah, sick brag. But, so yeah, I'm playing a little bit, but not with the same stakes I was playing before. And I probably won't until it's fully regulated in the United States. So once again, thank you, Hack3rcon. Thank you for inviting me to speak. It was a good time, and I'm free for questions afterwards. Thank you.